As many of you know, I enjoy scouring the used market for PC components in an attempt to build systems with the intention of flipping them for profit. In my last flip build video, I shared a system that I put together for $180. It featured an i5 6600 and a GTX 960. The PC was good enough for some entry-level 1080p gaming and could even handle a few more intensive titles at a lower resolution. I ended up selling that PC in an interesting deal where I traded my system for an RTX 3070 and $40. Generally, I avoid making trades, but I was interested in the 3070 to use for a secondary GPU and for testing CPUs on the channel. Ultimately, the deal meant that I got a 3070 for $140, which I consider a win, as this card goes for close to $300 normally. Anyways, I have another build to share on the channel. This one is a good bit more capable than the last and also costs about $40 more with a total build cost of $220. As always, I tend to only look for the best deals, and in terms of repeatability, this exact build might be hard to replicate for the price. However, if you are patient and your local market is rich with low-cost used parts, you can definitely put together something very similar. This build actually started a few months back when I found a motherboard from a local seller that was too good to pass up. For just $20, I got this MSI B360M Gaming Plus MATX board. The major reason that I got it for such a good price was due to the broken PCIe retaining latch. This has no effect on performance as long as the graphics card is properly installed and mounted to the case. With the LGA 1151 socketed B360 motherboard, I could really pair any 8th or 9th gen CPU. With a mid-range chipset like the B360, I felt best targeting an i5 processor. It really came down to whatever the best deal was on eBay. After a few weeks of waiting, I found an i5 8400 being sold for just $45. This 6-core, 6-threaded Coffee Lake processor was featured in my last upload. I determined that while this CPU and platform is not necessarily the best budget-friendly or future-proof option out there on the used market, it still handles 1080p gaming just fine in most titles when paired with capable systems. To cool the i5, I decided on this Cooler Master i30 CPU fan. I've used it multiple times before and it generally does a good job with lower powered processors that don't generate a ton of heat. I also like the low profile look that it gives. For system memory, I used two 8GB sticks of Corsair LPX DDR4 that I had on hand. I got these locally for just $15. This RAM is rated for a 3000 MHz frequency but will work great in my system despite the platform's max speed of 2666 MHz. Also, 16GB and dual channel is still enough in the sort of titles that this system will be best in. For storage, I decided for an SSD for Windows 10 and a hard disk drive for extra game storage. The SSD I selected is this TeamGroup T-Force 512GB SATA SSD. The prices on these fluctuate a lot, but I got mine for $25 on Amazon. The hard drive I'm using is a 7200 RPM drive made by Toshiba. I got this 500GB drive for just $5 locally. With a total of about 1TB for games and other programs, this is a great start for most people with potential for further expansion down the line if needed. For the graphics card, I had a lot of options already on hand. I decided that for this budget, one of the two GTX 1060 that I bought locally for $40 would pair best. The one that I chose is this MSI OC version. With 6GB of VRAM and updated driver support, the 1060 is still pretty capable for light to moderate 1080p gaming even in 2023. If you can get one of these for less than $60, it is a worthy adversary to something like the RX 580. Getting a power supply is one of the trickier tasks when putting together a budget system. When using higher end components, I would generally recommend not cheaping out and getting a unit with decent efficiency from a reputable brand. I got lucky and scored a refurbished Corsair CX500 unit for just $25 on eBay. I have never had issues with Corsair power supplies, and although this particular model does not have an efficiency rating and uses ketchup and mustard cables, I can't really complain for the price. With a max draw of 500 watts, this particular unit is more than enough to pair with this build. The last component that I got was the case. With a micro ATX motherboard and fairly compact GPU, I decided that an MATX size case would be best. For the sale price of just $40 brand new, I got this Cooler Master Q300L from Amazon. While it isn't my favorite case, I do appreciate how compact it is and how much airflow it provides. Overall, it was a pretty easy case to build in despite the non-modular power supply leading to extra unused cables. I didn't even end up using an intake fan since temps during my testing were great. This particular case even allows for the side I/O ports to be moved around and has rubber feet on the back to sit flat if the user chooses. Ultimately, for the total build cost of around $220, I feel this system packs a decent punch for the price. While there is not a ton of upgradability, It should be a great PC for a beginner or someone just looking to play a few older or lighter titles. Before selling it, I wanted to benchmark it in a few games just to show what it can do and any limitations that it may have. In Counter-Strike 2, at 1080p medium settings, I had no problems getting a very high refresh rate result with an average of just under 190 FPS and a 1% low of 106. On paper, this particular configuration should be great for most esports gaming. Next, I tested Cyberpunk 2077. At 1080p with the low preset and FSR 2.0 set to quality, the built-in benchmark resulted in an extremely playable 60 FPS average. This performance carried to the in-game testing as well, achieving around 60 FPS in most circumstances. Lastly, I tested Hogwarts Legacy, a game likely not suited for a system like this. At 1080p with the low preset and FSR set to balance, the system memory was nearly maxed out. Still, being mostly GPU bound, the 1060 provided a playable performance at these settings for someone not too picky about graphic fidelity, with frame rates averaging around 65 to 75 in most areas. I was personally pretty impressed with this result. I actually ended up selling this system before editing this video. After listing it locally on Marketplace, a buyer reached out and offered $360 in less than 24 hours, making this one of my quickest and most profitable flips yet. In total, the 3 PC flips shared on the channel have yielded me $100 profit, as well as a GTX 780 and an RTX 3070. Going forward, I intend to pursue more cash profit and really work my way up to some higher end flips. If you're interested in this sort of content, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Also, if you have any questions or video recommendations, do not hesitate to leave a comment. Thank you.